today because, well, the world is full of enough bullshit without me commenting on it, but I'll get back to it tomorrow or something. Today I want to change focus, and I wanted this will be a big video, so grab yourself a cup of tea or something like that. Now, it's about paganism, something you've heard me talk about. Now, there was a brilliant article in the Burkean.ie, which is an Irish philosophical, Christian, Catholic and Protestant, sort of like traditional nationalist philosophical magazine. Very, very good, actually. Some great satirical pieces on it, but it basically, they challenge the woke culture. And it's based on the philosophy of Edmund Burke. It was one of the great thinkers of the Enlightenment. And in the article, it basically said that I was probably the most influential pagan, true pagan in Ireland since William Butler Yeats. And I think that's true, and I'll tell you why without sound like I'm boasting. But it also talked about how mainstream paganism in Ireland is a disaster, which it is. Now, I'm going to talk about this not just in an Irish context. So if you live in Scandinavia, North America, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, Canada, anywhere, this is for all of us who are basically of a pagan inclination. And the reason why I've reached so many people in Ireland, even many devout Christian people with my sort of pagan philosophy, is because it's not neo-pagan, it's true paganism. And I'll explain this, and this will also help you in your own culture and your own country, because you will find that my dissertations on paganism, I have just as many people who are of African origin or Afro-Caribbean origin who have also discovered their paganism. And this is the beauty of paganism, is that it's truly the soul of humanity at its basic, and it has no identifiable things regarding hierarchies. It's all very much the same at the basis, in that Jungian, Joseph Campbell-esque type way. It's a calming, meditative philosophy lifestyle that allows you to exist within society without the tug of war that goes on between the polar aspects of modern Western or even any culture. This is also a very good safety net in many ways. Paganism in the Soviet world, in the communist world, actually survived, while the Bolsheviks were murdering and enslaving millions of people in the gulags of Siberia. All around those gulags, in the forests of Siberia, shamanism and paganism continued to flourish and thrive. That's because paganism is not seen as an antithesis to communism, because communism directly comes out, Bolshevism, and particularly, but Marxism as a whole, directly comes out of Abrahamic thought. The same Abrahamic psychic trajectories of polarized thinking, us or them, they must be converted or destroyed, is exactly taken from the book of Leviticus in the Old Testament and directly transferred into Engels and Marx. You have to remember this. If you're outside that system, if you're not a Christian or a Muslim, a Jew, or an Eastern Orthodox, a Catholic, you're not of interest to the Bolsheviks, because you're operating on a different software. Now, in the early days of the Soviet Union, I've seen these propaganda videos where they were portraying in cartoon form the shamans as kind of grifters and, users of people. And it didn't work, obviously, but there was not the same mass attack on them as there was, say, in Christian churches, Orthodox churches. This is important. And when the Soviet Union fell, we've discovered that in Poland, even though there's a great resurgence in Catholicism there, mainly because of Pope John Paul II, and also, and his great work. I have tremendous respect for Pope John Paul II. Everything included. You judge someone and things on the sum total of their lives, not on individual issues. That's also a very pagan way of thinking about things. The thing of like deciding a human being should have their entire life determined by the fact that some nuns and priests were raping kids is a very Abrahamic thought, that they're either sinners or saints, they're damned or they're good. Where in a pagan thought you'd say, well, yeah, that shit went on in the church and maybe he could have done better, but he took a bullet for his fate. He basically ended communism, and he came across a genuine, likable man. And that's how a pagan would. That's as a pagan I'm seeing Pope John Paul II. And when the Iron Curtain came down, we saw the flourishing of paganism again in Poland, in Hungary, Magyar, sorry, it wouldn't be Magyarian, it's not Roman, Magyar paganism, it just came flying right back. Shamanism is huge in Hungary. And this is the same across Eastern Europe, because the communists, the Bolsheviks, weren't particularly interested in pagans because we run on a different software. Now, central to my paganism is my rejection of any kind of apostolizing, sorry. I do not want to convert people. I want them to find this by themselves. In fact, the Burkean magazine said something to me that was a great honor. It said that Thomas Sheridan is an acquired taste. Yeah, that's what I am. If you're not ready to walk into the door, you're not ready. And you've got to go out and experience life in the world, and then you can come into my way of thinking. And if you like it, good. If you don't, that's cool. But that's a deliberate tactic, because I am not out to convert people to my way of thinking. I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is acquiring people of like minds who will drift into my circle, our tribe, my way of thinking. And that way it brings in people who are less likely to be echo chambers. So therefore I have as many Christians who admire my paganism as I do pagans. And this is important because the same reason I admire many Christians and Jews and Muslims who have understood that the true path to their spiritual growth is not postulizing. It's acceptance of what their fate is. And this is very important, right? So taking this further, if I am the most influential pagan voice in Ireland since William Butler Yeats, and I'm pretty sure I am, and I'll tell you why. I've reached thousands and thousands of Irish people with my philosophy, and that's what it is. I treat my paganism as a philosophical discourse as much as a spiritual foundation, because this is important. Within paganism, whether it be in the symposiums of ancient Athens, the forums of ancient Rome, the Druids of ancient Ireland, Britain, and France, and Italy, the philosophical discourse was central to that. And the Burkean article quite rightly pointed out that the main reason that Irish paganism is a mess today is because it has no interest in philosophy. It has replaced philosophy with woke, left-wing, socialist politics. And that's absolutely true. Now, I am an influential voice a pagan voice among the Irish right. Okay, I've been told that. But I'm not right-wing, I'm an anarchist. But I do believe that anarchy, like paganism, is a grounding equilibrium force. And right now, the left wing is completely psychotic and out of control. And by nudging, just like this would happen, the Druids were alive today, they'd do the same. By nudging people towards the right way of thinking, it will remove them from the extremities of the left wing psychosis that's currently running the body politic of Western civilization. And that's my feelings. I know there are pagans out there who might be inclinated towards left-wing and socialist ideas, and good for them. That's their path. But you're not a pagan. I'll tell you why you're not a pagan. The same reason I wouldn't be a pagan if I was a right-wing conservative. It's because it's the understanding of dynamic forces and the use of dynamic forces, whether they be psychic energy, philosophical concepts, political or social constructs in order to create a harmonious balance within the self and within the body politic as a whole and the culture as a whole. So, for instance, you have a situation where in my pagan path, I'll tell you, first of all, let me tell you what paganism isn't, okay? Right now, I'm going to tell you what paganism isn't. Paganism isn't a worship of nature. That is a neo-pagan, new age hippie idea which spawned out of Wicca, which itself is a branch of Judaism. So it's not a worship of nature. You can find nothing in paganism that worships nature as the primary touchstone of its philosophy. The primary, and it's also not a worship of fertility. What paganism, if you look everywhere, and the best way to uncover this, and how I have come towards the concept of chaos paganism, is comparative mythologies and connecting similarities or commonalities between different aspects of these comparative mythologies. I just gave you an example of a comparative historical aspect in paganism. The Druids and the symposiums of Greece and the forums of Rome were all about philosophical, scientific, political, genealogical, cultural, social, and other kinds of discourse, including spiritual. They were holistic, polymathic approaches. They did not sit around going Om. And in fact, if you go to the Hindu temples in Sri Lanka or in India, and you talk to the Swamis and the Brahmins, they will have discourses on politics. This is why the Indian National Congress was so successful under Gandhi, and even others, even Muslims within that, recognized it, that the traditional Hindu ability, which is very pagan, to philosophize and discourse things, is what helped Indian independence become so successful so quickly. Now, so what paganism isn't is a worship of nature. What paganism isn't is a fertility cult. The fertility cult thing is basically created by hippies who wanted to get laid. Hey man, our pagan ancestors, I'm a pagan man. It's a fertility cult. Let's get naked and worship the gods, and you get that with these neo-pagan druids, these sex cases who are standing outside their yurts with their staff, hitting on young chicks, this kind of thing. You get a lot of crap in the whole new age thing. Now, this is not. That's the whole fertility cult thing, was a thing to watch chicks run around naked and get laid. That's what that was. Just like the sexual revolution in the 60s was really made so fellas who couldn't get laid, the geeks and the nerds, again, could get laid. Now, it's not a worship of nature, and I'll tell you why. What paganism truly is, and you can work your way through all the philosophical discourses, all the mythology, all the history, what we know, what's left, is the worship of man, the worship of humanity. Because at the fundamental aspect of paganism and Hinduism is the belief that human consciousness is the engine which drives the universe. And quantum physics, particle physics, and theoretical physics has all validated this. It's the worship of your consciousness, the unique elements and aspects of a developed human consciousness to affect change in the material world, to also affect the dynamics of the psyche of the individual involved. I've always given the classic example on here of the monomyth, that if you apply the trials and tribulations of the gods and goddesses within mythology and pagan mythology into yourself during the trials and tribulations of your own life, it becomes an incredibly powerful device and mechanism of the psyche in order for you to overcome these This is never stressed within neo-paganism. In fact, it's more likely to be stressed by Christians like Carl Jung. And that's the irony of this, because he understood the power of this. Now, the so that's what it is. It's not a worship of nature. And people say things, well, what about all the veneration of all these nature gods? But they were all at some level anamorphized, and then they were humanized. There's a human quality to them. They would have started out as probably pure hermaphroditic nature gods, like you got within maybe in the earliest manifestations of the Norse gods. But they transformed into archetypal forms that were very human. If you see as paganism moves along, the gods are highly human. Zeus is a guy who shags women behind his wife's backs. He's the king of the gods, but he's also subject to the failings of a human being. Envy, being horny, being a selfish shitbag. But he also has virtues as well. The same with all the gods and goddesses in paganism. They were relatable and are relatable because they are us. They are our faults, virtues, follies, and victories, all expressed within their archetype. This is why things as simple as Marvel comics appeal to young people, and so on. All in the last century, this is the same. It tapped in. People like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were aware of this, and they used all their superheroes from the Fantastic Four through the Hulk, through Thor and the rest of them, Silver Surfer. But Silver Surfer was a very deep character, and even Spider-Man, to tap into the archetypal pagan forces behind that. They knew these things. They were clever, and they did a great service in many ways. But they created new gods for a new age, just like Lovecraft did. And this is why I'll put the article to my Chaos Paganism down below. What paganism really is. Paganism, like Hinduism, is an evolving concept. That's why there was an article in a video the other day, and a few articles about Hindus who worship the virus, the coronavirus, as a goddess. Now, we would laugh at that, but the people here in the West are worshipping the coronavirus as a god, but just through ignorance, fear, and loathing. The Hindu mind, because it understands the power of archetypes, knows that it can worship it as a literal goddess and then placate it through literal spiritual, and understand it through literal spiritual venerations. That's much more honest than someone who says, an atheist, an atheist professor who goes, I'm a rational atheist and there's no such thing as God, and then is embarking upon basically Christian rituals in order to fight the coronavirus, hand washing, social distancing, this kind of thing. It's as clear as day, because the software, the spiritual software, still needs servicing. That's what paganism is, the worship of consciousness in many ways, or the veneration or understanding of consciousness, and by means of engagement with nature as part of it, but not as the totality of it, by engagement with mythology, and so on. The pagan mind develops a different operating software, and this is something. I mean, okay, you guys in the Irish right, I hear you, lots of you are fans of me. One of the reasons you are is because you're seeing and hearing the innate wisdoms that haven't been spoken to the folk, to the people. See, since the time of the Druids, probably. You're hearing it again. I mean, even William Butler Yeats, the majority of his paganism was pointed towards, and I'm not knocking it or anything, and Lady Gregory, I'm not knocking these people, was directed towards Anglo-Irish ascendancy. But I'm reaching the folk. I'm reaching the people here, the folk spirit of the people, and that's why I'm reaching you, because your truths that have been suppressed are being reignited as fires in the consciousness of Celtic people, Gaelic people. Now the part why you shouldn't support neo-paganism, and why the Burkean is absolutely correct when it says Irish paganism is a mess right now. Even though I am the most influential voice in Irish paganism in centuries, probably, using a phone, It's just like this is the campfire, this is the circle, this is the symposium, this is the forum. Okay, now this is the grove. And that's paganism for you. It moves with the times, and so just like Hinduism moves with the times. And I'm not personally attacking. I know there's lots of well-intentioned good people within Irish mainstream pagan circles, but they're misguided echo chambers preaching to the converted, and they're wrong in every level. I notice some of them run wonderful websites, and they're good people who mean well, but the naivety of the decent, that say that the naivety of the well-meaning one are simply staggering. Uh, for instance, there's a well-known website that's great. It's brilliant, except for one thing. It takes Irish mythology literally. And this is the biggest problem with the pagan world and the neo-pagans in Ireland, is taking the mythology literally. The Irish mythology was written down by monks, Christian monks, okay? And they editorialized it wholesale to make it fit in with the Old Testament and the stories of the Old Testament, both timeline and overall ethos, okay? Therefore, you can't trust it. In fact, I would go as far as saying it's probably, most of it is probably lies or twisted, or there's a lot of truth in there that's buried in lies. Now, my approach to the Irish mythological thing is I don't care. I'm not in quoting the mythological cycles verbatim, the Book of Invasions, the Tyne, and so on, because I know who edited them. What I will find within them is comparative mythological, and this is the same in your country and your paganism, whether you're Norse paganism, remember that was all written down by Christians as well, and wherever you live, is the comparative relationship and interrelation with similar archetypal forms and within other mythologies, and in particular Hinduism, which is the nearest. Now, I'm not saying that we come from Indo-Europeans, that they come from Indo-Europeans, because they're not. That Aryan migration thing is very dodgy and iffy, but culturally it's sound. We know that for a fact. We know, you see, what happens is they're trying, within the Irish mythology, they want to make the tribes of Dan, the tribes of Israel, fit within that. And you saw that in British Israelism, where there's a whole thing. They want to make the Irish story of our people fit in with the Old Testament. So you had the British Israelites, who were sort of like the poisonous element of the pagan revival. Well, they were Christians, but of that kind of world around Yeats and Lady Gregory, saying things like the tribe of Dan, the people of Danu, the Tuatha Danann, were of the tribe of Daniel of the Bible, when the Tuatha Danann means the people of the goddess Danu, a pagan goddess. They just Daniel, same, this kind of thing. Scotia, Scotty, so on, same thing. All this nonsense, all this garbage. And as a result, you had this subterfuge of the pagan archetypes and the stealing of the pagan soul. And having things like they destroyed Tara. We will never be able to fully know what Tara looked like before St. Patrick's magical fire. Because the British Israelites went in there with spades, shovels, and even steam shovels and dug the shit out of Tara, Royal Tara, looking for, wait for it, the Ark of the Covenant. And this mentality is what still drives Irish paganism. This still belief that the mythological cycles are true. Now, the Burkean mentioned quite rightly that all these neo-pagan groups in Ireland, they talk about, how the ancient Irish pagans were all in favour of transgenderism and diversity, and they were all about inclusion and multiracialism. No, they weren't. They were killing each other left, right, and centre. The Book of Invasions is all about the Tuatha Danann coming in and exterminating the Fomorians, then the Milesian Gaels coming in and exterminating the Tuatha Danann. They're about conquest and takeover, just like we had all over the pagan world everywhere else, and you see it all over the Indian Vedas. You see it all over them too as well. Invasions, wars, takeovers, and this is our Indo-European background coming to the fore again. And people, so, this whole hippie thing, like, oh man, war's a bummer, man, war's a bummer. Our pagan ancestors didn't see war as a bummer. They saw it as a fact of consciousness and life. And that included things such as defense, defending the tribe. In the same way, ants will defend the anthill against an attack and this kind of thing. But they were also tolerant in the sense that once you didn't try and invade, everything was okay. Once you didn't try and change the prevailing culture, Romans were perfectly fine with having every single, from Hindus to pagans, to other pagans, to Jews, to Christians, all living under the pagan world, once they didn't try to take over. When they tried to take over, then there was a problem. And that's how paganism is. The prevailing culture is this, and you respect it. And if you try to take over, then we have war. We don't have inclusiveness. And you have these neo-pagan, I'm not calling for wars or anything like that. I'm calling for protection of our cultural heritage. I'm a cultural nationalist, not a political one. And part of my cultural nationalism is to readdress the lies of Irish pagan mythology being passed down by Christians, and the neo-pagans taking that up via the British Israelites and perpetuating the bullshit. This is why I am reaching countless thousands of people with my paganism, and the rest of the Irish mainstream respectable neo-pagans are either standing in a university campus hall preaching to professors about inclusivity and diversity within the book of invasions, or they're they're talking about how the Morrigan is this, or the Lou represented that, and this kind of thing, and it's always done in a very political, lovey-dovey, hippy-trippy way. Our ancestors didn't live like that. Ferda and Cuchulainn fought to the death. They didn't hug and sing "We Are the World." And that comes to, and this is when you can see, that's one of the things. It's a classic example of how I know that mythology wasn't interfered with too much by Christians, because it's very similar to the concept of the the Vedic or the Hindu world of the two halves, the poles of consciousness doing eternal battle. Now I'm going to bring you to be what the paganism really is about, and why it's so fantastically liberating. Even if you're a Christian, you can incorporate this into your worldview. In fact, that's what J.A.R. Tolkien did with his whole Middle Earth cycle. It's totally integratable. You don't have to convert, okay? What it really is confronting the shadow. Remember when I said earlier on that what paganism isn't is a worship of nature, it's a worship of humans. But it's not a worship of humanity, of the state of man, the soul of man, as an infallible, unconditional love. It's about the veneration of the human soul, and by extension, the human consciousness through archetypal forms within the greater wild, the universe, in all its forms, good and bad. You see this in Shintoism and you see this in Taoism. The same thing, the integration of the shadow along with the positives and the negative. Not in the binary way of, say, the book of Leviticus, where there's just us and them and you kill them or convert them. Nothing like that at all. This is the integration, the merging of the two. So for instance, you will look at the mythology in its purest form, and you have like the battle between Ferda and Cuchulainn. That's symbolic, and just like it's Arjuna and Krishna in the Vedas, it's symbolic of the dark and light finding balance, finding equilibrium, finding harmonious relationships within the self that you find in nature. So you see, you'll have people saying, oh, nature's so perfectly imbalanced. That's why I'm a vegan. And yet they ignore the fact that from the insects and microbes under their feet all the way up to the largest mammals in the ocean, they're tearing themselves asunder in order to survive. But because they can get fair trade organic coffee, craft coffee, from the health food store, they think that they're in balance with nature. They couldn't be further out of balance. And this is why we have to be careful of these cultural Marxists taking over paganism. We saw that, I've seen it very, when I saw the president of Ireland, Bilbo, Bilbo pensions, uh, at the Ushnock festival, I was like very wary. And then you see these parade of these kind of feminist goddess, this bullshit, and then, and you see what happens. You look at Stonehenge on the solstice, and you have like, Brazilian dancers, it's like I always said, I would never profane a Native American's medicine circle by going in there and start, singing praises of Lou and the Morrigan. It's a profane thing to do. What I would do is observe, say, that's very interesting. And in Celtic mythology, we have something very similar. And a discourse begins. This is why pagans of different traditions have no conflicts with pagans of other traditions, because what we see are the comparative similarities expressed through regional and cultural things. Everything that multicultural and the diversity thing of the cultural Marxists is out to destroy. Out to destroy. And they know that paganism is growing, and that's why they stick these woke neo-pagan goddesses, that on a stage to talk to academics about it, and make sure that they get as much play as possible. And they'll never come to someone like me, because I mean, you could easily say what I do is punk rock paganism, because I'm still at heart a punk rocker, and that's the world I grew up in, and I still feel that way about everything, and I don't want to be part of the establishment, because the establishment is not controlled by you, the folk. It's controlled by corporations predominantly today, predominantly big at the moment, big tech. It's not controlled by the people, not at all. And that's why I don't want to be part of that scene. I want to use this phone to talk to the folk, the people, the folk spirit of the masses. And that's what paganism is about. It's about us. It's not about anything else. It's about the individual. This is why socialism, if you're a lefty and you're a pagan, you're about as far from paganism as you can get. Because paganism is about the self. It's about seeing yourself as something special in the creation of the universe. And by extension, your consciousness has the power to affect the greater change within the universe. That makes you individually almost like a kind of a god or a goddess, or a better way of phrasing it, like it's in the Vedas, is that you're one of the eyes of God looking back at the universe, creating the universe. You're a very special thing. This is what that is. Now, another thing that neo-pagans don't want to do is accept the intensity of pagan sacrifice. Let's talk about sacrifice here, okay? Sacrifice just literally means giving up something, okay? Now, I performed the ritual with you guys, the Empire of False Pestilence ritual using an egg. You were involved in animal sacrifice, and I'll tell you why. That egg could have grown up to be a chicken, but it ended up being used in a magical ritual tossed into a river. So congratulations, you've just crossed the animal sacrifice threshold without fully realizing it. But you did, okay? That doesn't mean you go out and you find a sheep and you cut its throat, or you do anything like. You don't have to do that. You can take an oyster, and you can thank the oyster for sacrificing its life for your nourishment, and kill the oyster and have it with your pint of Guinness. That way, that oyster isn't just this would if you ate an oyster that way, we'd be less likely to have the horrible factory farms and meat processing that we have of animals today, because we would be thanking them. So there you go. So there's the sacrifice. Is it so evil and spooky now? Are people being born in wicker men, which has all been shown to be complete bullshit? No. Or bullshit movies like Midsummer, where the people throw themselves off cliffs and kill Americans, who have racial relationship problems. None of this shit. It's nothing like that at all. They were just like us. So just, so therefore, I, I got you involved in a mass animal sacrifice ritual and you didn't even know it, because an egg is a fucking animal. It didn't become a chicken. It became it became an intention of consciousness, an engine being greased by the gears of the psyche. Does it seem so evil and spooky now? Now you're learning what paganism is, and now you're understanding why I'm reaching the people. Because this is what it really is. How empowering is that now? Suddenly your terror and fears of the concept of sacrifice are going. Praying? What's praying? Praying is welfare. Praying is saying to the Jewish sky fairy, please do this for me. And he'll go, I'll do it for you, but you owe me later. This kind of thing. The sacrifice was, with the egg ritual, you bought the egg. You paid for it. You could have eaten that egg for your breakfast, but you didn't. Instead, you placed your magical intention upon the egg and you cast it upon the waters. And many people talked about the satisfying sound of that plop as it hit the water. You went home and you felt better, okay? You cherished, instead of that egg being thrown into a frying pan and casually put between two pieces of slices of toast, the egg, or the animal inside, the unborn embryo inside it, became something special, and its life force wasn't sacrificed to an egg McMuffin. Its life force was sacrificed to something to get the human race out of political and cultural bondage that it's under at the moment. Now do you understand why I'm a pagan? Now do you understand the power of this stuff? Now do you understand why I reject politics in terms of joining any side? At the same time, too, recognizing as a pagan that it's a factor of the material world I live in. And right now the lefties are out of control. And that's why I'm nudging things towards the right. I'm not a right-wing conservative. I am an anarchist. But I understand in true anarchist sense that imbalances are addressed through adjustments and equilibrium within the whole conscious processing of the situation, paradigm, or cultural concept. This is paganism. That's what it is. It's not venerating the Morrigan to make you a goddess. It's not. It's none of this stuff. It's understanding what the archetypes mean and where they can take you as an individual and all of us as a society. And this paganism, this true paganism, is a message not just for people all dressed in black that look like rejects from a bad night listening to Fields of the Nephilim. And I love Fields of the Nephilim. But you know what I'm saying? This whole thing, that's another thing. All the pagan witches all dressed in black. No, they didn't. They would have stood out a mile, especially in Christian times. During Christian times, the pagans would have went to every effort to hide themselves. The witches would have went to everything. They're just like the Cathars, they would be unseen. You wouldn't bring attention to themselves. The same reason I don't walk around in a cape holding a staff. It's bullshit, pure bollocks. That's absolute bullshit. Who are you going to reach then? You got to walk down the street you got to fucking show up on social media with a staff and a fucking and standing outside a yurt and wearing a cloak. Who are you going to actually appeal to? That's actually of any value to society and making a better world? No one. But if you're just a regular fella or a regular girl and you're a pagan and you're going down the street and you're just like any other fucking gobshite in the neighborhood, and then you start talking casually about it, and you will reach people. You will shift their conscious way of thinking. You will snap them out of the prevailing software that they're programmed with by the culture. And this is a message. What my message is not is. See, this is one of the problems, and then there's the other extreme of paganism where you had back in the 90s where you had Nordic paganism setting fire to churches and stuff like that. Yeah, at the time I thought it was very funny, but at the time, then you realise that Jesus Christ, there could have been someone killed in that. At the same time, too, then I started to see it starting to look like bullshit because Satanists are starting to these pretend, Formica IKEA Satanists, edgelords start thinking it's Satanism, and they start putting swastikas and 666 on the churches and burning them, completely missing the point, and therefore aligning paganism with Satanism again. So it's like that's why that got pretty bad pretty quickly. because it attracted, and even the people who were behind it initially will tell you that that was what went wrong, because the stupid Satanists started, like edgelords started, and again, ironically, Satanists are Christians too, but started, thinking it was about 666 and pentagrams and all this bullshit, and yeah, so that's it. That's paganism. That's why I'm reaching an audience. I'm me, and you be you.